guys are going to make me cry. Stop. Thank you so much, Nick. That was so very kind of you. I'm kind of emotional now hearing that. So I'm going to take a minute. Wow, it's an honor to be here, to be voted by your graduating class. I can only express in very few words how this makes me feel. I have a confession to make, though. The only reason I wanted to be commencement speaker this year so everyone could get a good look of my sari. That's great, right? I thought so, yeah. Anyways, jokes aside, I do have a few questions for the audience, so feel free to respond by raising your hand so I can see it, just with a show of hands. How many of you know what's happening in Yemen? Okay. How many of you know what's happening to the Rohingya? Okay. How many of you heard about the sexual assault, pardon me, the many sexual assault victims in India? Okay. How many of you know about what's happening in Venezuela? How many of you follow on a regular basis what's going on in the United States of America? So I can be wrong, but from what I can tell, all the other issues I talked about, everyone was kind of 50-50, but with the US, a lot of you follow what goes on. Let me share an instance with you, which is small, but significant to me. I hosted a vigil about 2 weeks ago. I'm the organizer for Junoon, South Asian Students Association, which is a club on campus centered on events happening in the subcontinent, whether cultural or political. This vigil that we hosted was to support the family of a sexual assault victim that had recently passed away in Jammu and Kashmir, which is one of the 29 states in India. I won't go into the details of it, but it was brutal, and this event that my co-signer and I hosted was to honor her and raise some money for her family. Anyone want to take a fair guess of how many students showed up to this event? There were never more than 5 people, even those in increments. I was a bit shook by how much it impacted me that people didn't show up for this event. I questioned it over and over again. Why was I so bothered by it? Probably after I racked my brain for a couple hours, I realized that my anger was rooted in my constant and utter disappointment in a community that is usually so avidly involved in issues around social justice and advocacy. I'll give you another reason for my disappointment. I grew up in India and in the United Arab Emirates. One is in South Asia and the other is part of the Middle East. Throughout my upbringing, I was taught to focus on the world outside of these two countries, to attain a more global understanding. Imagine my concern when I moved to a country that is so centered on its own issues that people don't look outside of it enough. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to mislead you on this issue. Hampshire's community does care about other events happening outside of the US, but only when it's related to them or when it relates directly or indirectly to this country, or when there's some form of festival. The more I've thought about this and reflected on my time here as an international student of color, I've realized the uniqueness of my position. My very first semester at Hampshire, I felt like a misfit, like I couldn't fully be a part of this community. Not because I didn't have any friends or because I wasn't social. I believe it was because I knew close to nothing about the racial politics, issues around gender, and most importantly, the Western way of engaging and thinking about these issues. Soon after, I understood that if I wanted to be a part of the Hampshire community, I needed to decolonize my mind and unlearn the many problematic opinions I may have had. During this process, I encountered the stark realization that being a person of color at Hampshire was different than being brown in India, and that being an international student complicated my stance on the many issues that were addressed on campus. Another striking realization that I had was that before coming to Hampshire, I had never been labeled with one core identity or been told that I was part of a minority or that I was marginalized without knowing a single thing about my history. I had never experienced being labeled and grouped into one identity and had assumptions made about me due to the color of my skin and the flair of Indianness in my accent. It doesn't stop there, though. I've had people take pity on me because I'm from a third world country. I've been fetishized because I'm exotic. I've been tokenized as the hybrid person of color, neither here nor there. I've been asked, do people in India speak in English? and have reluctantly held back on yelling at them, "We were colonized for 200 years by the British." And instead just responded with a, "It depends, for the most part, yes." If I were to count the number of times someone mispronounced or misspelled my name, the speech would go on for a couple hours at least. And this isn't a struggle faced singularly by me. You can ask other international students, and they will more or less echo the same sentiment. It has been a journey of being absolutely amazed and stunned at the lack of awareness that the people around me have had about where I come from. It's been fascinating that so many people throw their sympathy at me for issues they had no idea about, while I control my laughter because I never wanted your sympathy, I wanted your empathy. I don't think I've ever walked on eggshells the way I have here, constantly trying to prove my worth, my awareness, my wokeness, my politics, and I can go on. I realize that now, that I couldn't have expected the same from the very people that had pushed me to complicate my opinions and stances over the last 4 years. This is what has frustrated me. I'm a firm believer of the idea that change begins at home, so I understand the emphasis on solving the issues and crises of this very country before branching out. Although, when home is the reason for issues outside of it, then home needs to do better. We as people that have devoted our time and energy into understanding the many complex situations we've been posed with, whether on a Hampshire scale or bigger, need to do better. We need to come to the realization that there's a world outside of the West and outside of this bubble that is yearning for action. So I urge, with my deepest hope, that the graduating class of 2018 can use their loyalty and passion towards lending a hand, complicating their own positionality outside of this country and uprise themselves. While I have struggled to define myself, define, and then redefine my position in this myriad of issues and unknown tepid waters, since day one, I know that I belonged here. Now, it may sound contradictory to everything else I've just said so far, but I think that that is a true depiction of a Hampshire experience. It's that you know you belong here, but at the same time, you are tested every step of the way, being reminded that there are problems within this community that need to be addressed. However, in my opinion, there are problems everywhere you go. Today, you're here. Tomorrow, you might be 11,514 kilometers away in Delhi. That's roughly 7,000 miles. I still don't use miles. Trying to constantly educate those around you about LGBTQ rights. It's to say that you don't know where life is taking you next, and I can say from experience that it's hard to pack your bags and go into an unknown perhaps, but everything that you and I, and by extension our friends and family, have taught and learned will come in handy. Never would I have ever thought that I could have a structured life coming out of a 4-year undergraduate program that is so unstructured. I believe, and I take the liberty to speak for my peers, that Hampshire's biggest strength lies in its ability to allow its students to be free thinkers. I have worked independently on projects, I've found my voice, I've experienced a type of freedom I cannot experience anywhere else. I often think about what would have happened had I not decided to come to Hampshire? What would have happened if I went anywhere else? I've never been so comfortably loud, or obnoxious, or weird anywhere else. Nowhere else have I so freely gone to events just for the free food, without knowing anything about the event. And to this day, I can't seem to find an answer that makes me happy, and that speaks volumes to me. My first day here, when OC, who was their national student advisor at the time of, greeted me at Merrill, to this very moment as I stand in front of you, I count the number of times I've felt grateful for this experience. It has made me who I am, it has built me, it has made me stronger, and it has given me more than I thought it would. It's given me a sense of perspective, a critical lens, and a will to change. It has given me the opportunity to blossom into the person I am today, a person I'm proud of, friends that I'm proud of, who I've seen evolve and grow so much. It's given me 2 beautiful pillars of strength, my friends Kamal and Lisa. For context, Kamal hated me all of our first year, but usually denies it by saying, "I knew deep down that you were a good friend." And Lisa, whose name I didn't remember for the first 2 weeks I knew her. I'm still sorry about that. And many others, many others that have supported me throughout my time here. And for that, I'm truly grateful. And I'm sure it's given the rest of you a sense of home too, whether through friends or professors or the journey of getting to know yourself better. Sometimes we are a community, and sometimes we are not. And I think that that's due to our individualistic personalities. We all bring something new to the table. Moving forward, I hope that we remember that we are all parts of the same puzzle. We've come this far with the support of one another, and as we continue moving forward, we should hold this experience close. We, as a generation, are facing a crisis that is impossible for one entity to tackle by itself. But together, we're a lot more influential. So, to the graduating class of 2018, I ask of you to never forget where you come from, the changes that you have brought about, and all that you have achieved. Channel that achievement into being the best versions of yourselves. Remember that this is a community you can look back to whenever you need. The world awaits our resilient, powerful, headstrong, and passionate selves. Congratulations to everyone for coming this far. Now, very quickly, before I leave this podium, I'm going to do something embarrassing. My mom cringed when I told her I was going to do this, and she was like, no, please don't. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. So I'd like to give a shout out to my parents, Nibha and Dhirendra Joshi, my 12-year-old brother, Shaurya, and my pupper, Scrappy, for being by my side always. I love you guys. Thank you so much.